can't be racist. So before you bring out your weapons of mass destruction, because definitions are being presented, so here the definition and what's being said before making assumptions and accusations.
Hey, before we get started, I just want to drop some more knowledge on you. Knowledge that will make you proud, knowledge that will make you happy, knowledge that your schools have missed out on, especially in this day and age of books being banned. Knowledge to renew your mind on. Check it out.
Ever wondered who made it so easy for us to send letters right from our doorstep? Let me introduce you to Philip B. Downing, an unsung hero who revolutionized mail delivery. Born in 1857, Philip B. Downing was an African-American inventor who, in 1897, patented the street letterbox. You know, the mailbox. Before this, sending mail meant trekking all the way to the post office. Thanks to Downing, we got to simply drop our letters into a secure box right near our homes. His invention wasn't just about convenience. It protected mail from theft with its secure design. No more worrying about someone swiping your letters. Plus, the hinged opening kept rain and snow out so your mail stayed safe and dry. But wait, there's more. Downing wasn't a one-hit wonder. He also created an operating street railway switch which could be opened or closed with a brass arm on the platform of the car. Pretty neat, huh? And he didn't stop there. Downing added an anti-tampering function to mailboxes, ensuring even more security. He also invented an envelope moistener that used a roller and a small water tank, making it easier to seal envelopes. Oh, and let's not forget his desktop notepad. Philip B. Downing's contributions made everyday life more convenient, secure, and efficient. So next time you drop a letter in the mailbox, give a nod.
As I stated before, the reason for this series, the reason I want to keep talking about this, be it racism, is because it's a subject that will never go away, even though people want to think it has or will, but it'll never go away, because as long as there's sin in the world, racism will still be there. Bottom line. So people need to take their heads out of the sand and face reality, because it's never going to go away until the second coming of Christ. Point blank, simple as that. Now, here's Pastor Price.
All right, now let's get back to where I left off last time. We're talking about racism. Dr. Claude Anderson, who is black and the author of the celebrated book, Black Labor, White Wealth, in a public meeting held here in the Crenshaw Christian Center Faith Dome, said almost the identical thing that Mr. Kimball said. That was the one that we quoted last time, in reference to racism. Dr. Anderson, speaking to a mostly black audience, said, and I quote, I want you to understand that you are in a very highly competitive situation. You're going to be competing to survive and prosper. And that's what racism is all about. Contrary to what anybody tells you, and I just saw a definition of racism in the Washington Post just last week, who is a noted columnist, who is a conservative. And what he was really talking about was prejudice and discrimination. He wasn't talking about racism, but he was mystifying the word. That's why I finally figured out why he's always on the wrong side of issues relating to black folk. He thinks a black person can be a racist. A black person cannot be a racist. Now, I said this before, I want to say it again. That's not to say that a black person cannot be racially prejudiced, that a black person cannot be a bigot, but a black person cannot be a racist, because racism is about economics. It's not about color. Racial prejudice is about color, and anybody can be prejudiced, but only a certain group can be racist. All right, a black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means that one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resources that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never, say never. Never. Dr. Anderson goes on to say, never in the history of the earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources where they have gone out of their way to exploit injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century. Racism. We're not talking about racial prejudice now. You got to keep those two things separated. Okay? When they began to commercialize slavery against blacks, that's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing you need to know about racism is racism comes from the word race, R-A-C-E. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about you cannot prove racism because someone fires you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism. Because racism, hear this well, racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. Because I discriminate against you, that's individual. That's personal. It's not group-based. And so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, which is very important, is that the word race means being in competition. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we're in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete and survive, or not compete and perish.
Right.
The system is stacked against you.
Definitely.
And if we don't pull together, we're going to be in the dugout, not out on the playing field. We're going to be on the bench, not on the court shooting baskets. And that's how you subjugate a people, is keep them divided. Mm-hmm. And they have done a masterful job. Now listen, again, black people must learn how to compete and survive. Now, see, we're not talking about being against anybody. That's where everybody gets scared when you start talking about it. It's amazing, every other culture group can come together and everybody thinks it's nice. But when black people try to get together, all of a sudden there's something wrong with that. See, that's a part of the mentality and the mindset to keep us divided so that we're fragmented and don't have strength. See, if you take a string, wrap it around your hand, just a little small string, and take the other string, the other end of it, and wrap it around your hand, and hold it like this and go, you can break that string. But you put 500 of them strings together, you will never break them.
Good analogy.
All right. Now, in my humble opinion, and that's the end of the quote. Let me read that again. Black people must learn how to compete and survive or not compete and perish. End of quote. In my humble opinion, these statements by Mr. Keivel and Dr. Anderson say all there is to say about the definition of racism as practiced here in the United States. In other words, these two men have given us the technical definition of racism. However, in this segment of our teaching, my purpose is to talk about racial prejudice, which traditionally has been interpreted as racism. That's what the average person thinks when he hears the word racism. He thinks racial prejudice. In a book entitled All God's Children, author Stephen L. McKenzie, associate professor of Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Rhodes College, Memphis, Tennessee, copyright 1997 by Stephen L. McKenzie, on page 122 makes this illuminating statement, and I quote, "Despite the progress of the civil rights movement in the 1960s and the following decades, racism is still very much an issue in this country." racial integration, which has crept into schools, businesses, and other institutions in America, tragically has made little headway in the churches. Fannie Lou Hamer's observation about Sunday morning church service being the most segregated hour in America is as true today as it was 20 years ago.
And here we are.
End of quote. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, from 1619, now I don't know, I have to read this, but do you have, have you ever been on a commercial airliner and right in the little pocket in front of you, they have little plastic bags in case you get air sick? Do y'all have any plastic bags with you today? Because what I'm getting ready to share with you now may tend to cause air sickness to come upon you. But I hope you'll be able to maintain yourself. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, and I quote, from 1619 until slavery ended officially in 1865, 10 to 15 million Africans were brought here to America, and another 30 to 35 million died in transport. A journey called the Middle Passage. In all, 40, conservatively speaking, 40 to 50 million Africans were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents, end of quote. Now we just quoted.
So you think about that. $40 to 50 million killed. That is an astronomical number. 40 to 50 million killed.
A white man, not an angry black revolutionary. We just quoted from the book of a white man. Caucasian, Caucasoid, white, 40 to 50 million were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents. End of quote. That's awesome, to say the least. We get upset and righteously indignant, and rightly so, when we think about Adolf Hitler and the annihilation of 6 million Jews during World War II, which was without question a tragedy. But who gets righteously indignant and upset about 50 million black Africans who were abducted or killed by the forefathers of this nation?
Very valid point there. Very valid. And mention that again, 40 to 50 million Africans that were annihilated, killed, whatever, okay? Not to mention those that were families that were dispersed, broken up, just ran through. History, in a sense, dissolved. So you count 6 million versus 40 to 50 million, that is a significant number, a crazy astronomical difference. But that number is never brought up. So think about that. Never brought up. And he had mentioned systemic racism. Well, systemic racism is very much a thing today, and it was very much so then, and it's still present now. It's just tucked neatly under a rug, so to speak. And again, you have people, and even some blacks who say that it's non-existent now, that it doesn't matter anymore. Always be aware of someone who says that it doesn't matter anymore, we've outgrown it or whatever. Always be wary of someone speaking like that. Again, I tell you that this is about sin. Sin doesn't just go away. Sin is very cognizant in our society. Again, it will be here until the day Christ returns. Simple as that. And I have to keep saying this over and over again because people in general don't really, they're really not up on history. And basically, the Bible itself is an instruction book and also a history book. And we are to learn both ways from it. But again, we get a lot of people these days, they don't want history. Therefore, they keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And it's a shame. That is a shame. So, till we meet again, continue to renew your mind. That's it.